How many are we missing?
About 3 or 4, 5. They better get over here. There they are, all running.
Yes, I thought you were going to leave us behind.
That was really good.
Cairo at last. Craig picked out the Hotel Cosmopolitan, a charming old Art Deco hotel in central Cairo. It isn't really a tourist hotel, more of a commercial traveler place. It doesn't have a gift shop and it doesn't have many tourist amenities. The rates were very good, however, and we each had our own private room. This proved to be handy when I had my gallbladder attack and ended up spending a day in bed. My favorite hotel feature was the marvelous open cage elevator, but the real value of the hotel was its location, just a 10-minute walk to the Egyptian Museum, home of King Tut. The hotel was an interesting mix of bare-bone accommodations and beautiful crystal chandeliers. Of course, you can't visit Egypt unless you return loaded down with pictures of the pyramids of Giza. We did the whole tourist bit, took the tour bus, shopped for souvenirs, took pictures, had pictures taken. Having your photo taken on a camel is a real must. I did just fine, but Craig got kidnapped. Yep, once he was up on top of that camel, he was at their mercy. They led the camel behind a sand dune and demanded that Craig pay a ransom before they'd take him back to civilization. One of our many Egyptian experiences. The Great Pyramid of Giza was completed in 2690 BC. It took over 100,000 men working 30 years to move and place 2.5 million limestone blocks, weighing a total of 6 million tons. The pyramids of Giza represent the culmination of pyramid building over a 2-century period. It began in Saqqara when Zoser commissioned the architect IMHO to design a grand tomb. Until this time, burials were done in mastabas, low, flat, single-level structures. Amenhotep enlarged the base mastaba 100-fold and placed 5 successively smaller ones atop one another. The result is the 200-foot-high step pyramid in Saqqara, which is the model that was used for the Great Pyramids of Giza. By the way, Saqqara is just 20 miles south of Cairo and you really shouldn't miss it. It was the necropolis for Memphis, the capital of Egypt during the Old and Middle Kingdoms, and is actually of greater historic interest than even Giza. The best way to see the pyramids and avoid other tourists is to go on horseback. Craig, who is not an equestrian, indulged me by agreeing to this adventure. Not only do you get to see other views of the pyramids, you see lesser tombs of the nobles and even graves of the common workers. Of course, managing a horse in a camcorder was a challenge, but it was worth the effort. It was a mystical experience. Alone on horseback, away from the tour buses or any sign of civilization, you can imagine the awe with which the pyramids were viewed. They were built, robbed, and fell into disrepair 25 centuries before the birth of Christ. The ancient Greeks named them one of the 7 wonders of the world. They were visited by Herodotus. Antony, lover of Cleopatra, climbed them. Napoleon praised them. Today, scientists still study the mysteries surrounding them. This view from the desert gives a deeper understanding to the words, "Man fears time, but time fears the pyramids." Right about here, future archaeologists will find my camcorder battery. The pyramids are a hard, no, an impossible act to follow. But in Cairo, the Cairo Tower is the second best known landmark. Nearly 5,000 years younger than the pyramids, it was built in 1961. It was paid for by American government, who gave funds to Egypt to purchase arms. Instead, Egypt used the money to construct this radio tower on the Gezira Island in the center of the Nile. Personally, I'm delighted with their choice. There's a nice little cafe at the top, and you can go outside and enjoy a 360-degree view of Cairo. Well, you can enjoy what you can see through the smog. Cairo is the largest city on the continent of Africa and has a population somewhere between 18 and 20 million people, so pollution is a constant and growing problem. Despite its size and location on the Nile, Cairo has only been the capital of Egypt for the past 1,500 years. During the Pharaonic era, the capital alternated between Thebes and Memphis. During the last centuries of the pharaoh, Egypt was repeatedly invaded by tribes from other parts of Africa and the East. In 332 BC, Alexander the Great conquered Egypt and moved the capital to Alexandria on the Mediterranean coast, and it remained there even when the Romans took power 300 years later. Throughout this period, Cairo was an important city, but it wasn't until the 12th century that Saladin united the government once again in Cairo. Even then, Egypt was not ruled by Egyptians. One invader succeeded another, including the French rule in the 18th to mid-19th centuries, followed by British rule into the 20th century. After World War II, the British began a gradual withdrawal. Finally, in 1952, the army staged a coup and overthrew the corrupt Farouk government. And the following year, Egypt became a republic governed by Egyptians for the first time in 2.5 millennia. For local travel, you can take a taxi, a bus, or the metro. But a river bus is a fast and easy way to get to a number of Cairo sites. The Nile has been used for travel for thousands of years, and today you'll see ancient feluccas, rowboats, modern yachts, and even windsurfers. The water is a brownish green and only appears blue when it reflects the sky. People still fish in the Nile, and perhaps the fish are safe to eat, but I never ordered seafood while I was in Egypt. I also never went windsurfing, but the beautiful weather made it look very, very tempting. Our destination is Old Cairo. Given the smog in Cairo, the traffic congestion shouldn't be a big surprise. Cars, buses, and even donkey-pulled wagons mix together and add to the chaotic excitement of the city. Watch these pedestrians. No, Craig isn't stalking them. He's just using them as mirrors while he's learning the fine Egyptian skill of street crossing. Okay, they're ready to go. 1, 2, 3.
Over the curb. Ouch!
I expected to see donkey-pulled wagons in small villages, but was surprised to discover that in Cairo it's not uncommon to see animals and machines sharing the same streets, and doing so without any problem. These calèches are for tourists, and I love the sign. The town of kind meeting wishes you an enjoyable time. The Egyptian version of plan ahead. Even a calèche can have a breakdown, and a taxi may need a push. Forget lemonade stands. This young entrepreneur has a car wash, or donkey wash, whatever. We're taking a walk through Old Cairo. Old Cairo is no older than the rest of Cairo, give or take a millennia, but the name serves to identify an area that is south of central Cairo, just a 20-minute ride on the river bus. It's also walking distance to Coptic Cairo, which has several famous Christian churches, and Islamic Cairo, which has numerous beautiful mosques. Our hotel is in central Cairo, which is similar to the downtown areas of many major cities. Tall office buildings, department stores, McDonald's, plus of course the ubiquitous horse-drawn wagons. Here in Old Cairo, the streets are also congested with people going about their daily chores. but the buildings are older and the stores harken back to an earlier time. This neighborhood looks like what we would label as poor or run down, but you'll notice that the people are well dressed and the abundance of merchandise indicates a healthy economy. People are very friendly, and when we found turkeys roosting in a tree, the owner came out and pointed to them just to make sure that we got a picture. The meat market is similar to what you find in many countries. Sides of beef or lamb hang outside, and the butcher cuts your order while you wait. Craig and I walked through the area, and I tried to use my camcorder while walking, so the filming has some rough spots, but I think you can get a feel for the place. I don't know if this was a typical day or not, but there was plenty of fresh produce on display. Of course, we come from a culture where meat is pre-cut and sold in sanitized packages, and buying produce at the farmer's market is a trendy weekend outing. Here, daily harvesting, purchasing, cooking, and consumption is a necessity, not a luxury. Craig finally succumbed to temptation and purchased some olives for a snack. I watched and videoed the entire transaction, and I was wondering why he was buying so much. I mean, he knows I don't like olives, and it was supposed to just be a snack. Afterwards, I said, "How come you got so much?" And he said, "Well, I don't know. How much is any kilo anyway?" When you think of Egypt, what comes to mind? Well, pyramids, of course, but what about papyrus? There's the famous Dr. Reghab's Papyrus Museum. In this museum, you can see a demonstration of how the papyrus plant is converted to paper, and, of course, you can purchase a replica of an ancient scene. Jalabayas are the long gowns that men wear. Egypt is famous for its cotton, and outside central Cairo, where most people tend to wear Western clothing, men seem to prefer wearing these long cotton gowns. I imagine that in a hot climate they're far more comfortable than Western clothes because they allow air circulation and at the same time they provide a complete protection from the sun. Although tourists can pick up jalabayas for under $5, those are just cheap souvenirs and very poorly made. The quality garments are more expensive and can be very beautiful with applique designs and intricate hand stitching. Women also wear long gowns, and whether they dress in black or in bright colors, they always wear a scarf over their hair. When I look at the shopping photos, I see that, like the video, I seem to have gotten lots of pictures of food. I wonder why. I think it's because the colors and textures are interesting, but maybe it's just because I like to eat. Actually, the food in Egypt was great as long as you went to places where Egyptians ate. Any restaurant for tourists seems to be really bland, boring meals. It was really a shame because Egypt is well known for spices and herbs, and when the food is good, it's really, really good. Many tourists actually shop at the local spice markets and brought spices to take home. If shopping were a competitive sport, I'd be a definite winner. I came back with a camel saddle. Not one of the tourist saddles with a shiny lacquer finish and lots of brass nails, but the genuine article. In fact, they didn't have exactly what I wanted, but they were willing to do almost anything to make a sale. While I waited, someone ran down to a nearby camel stable and found an old one for me. It was coated with dust, camel hair, and sweat, but I managed to bring it home with me on the plane. Don't ask how, and it's now used as a footstool in my living room. Coptic Cairo is the oldest section of Old Cairo. The earliest known settlement in this area was in the 6th century BC, about the time the Persians conquered Egypt. In 31 BC, the Romans defeated the Greeks and tried to eradicate the old Egyptian gods. Egyptians rebelled against being forced to believe in Roman gods, and during this religious upheaval, many Egyptians chose to convert to a new cult called Christianity, which had been brought to Egypt by St. Mark. In the 2nd century AD, the Romans built a fortress which they named Babylon in Egypt, and it was in this Babylon that Christianity flourished.
The Roman fortress of Babylon, founded by Emperor Trajan and enlarged by Diocletian, once overlooked the Nile. The river has since shifted 600 meters to the west. The main gate was flanked by 2 circular towers which still survive in part.
The Church of St. George is one of 5 churches in Coptic Cairo and one of the few remaining circular churches in the Middle East. Next door is the convent of St. George, where a chain wrapping ritual takes place. The following quote is from my guidebook. A nun oversees the wrapping and says the requisite prayers. Several of the nuns speak English and are thrilled when you ask them questions about their beliefs and will gladly wrap you in chains. It is possible to take photographs. The church seen in the background here is dedicated to Saint Barbara, who was beaten to death for trying to convert her father to Christianity. We are now in the Christian cemetery in Coptic Cairo. The cemetery has separate sections for Coptic Christians and Orthodox Greek Christians. Due to an internal theological conflict in the 4th century, they broke from the Eastern Orthodox Church and became known as Egyptian or Coptic Christians. The Arab conquest of Egypt in 640 AD brought Islam with it. However, the Arabs settled north of the Babylon fortress, leaving Coptic Cairo as a Christian suburb in what eventually became a Muslim country. Although 90% of Egypt is Muslim, 10% remains Coptic Christian, and the Coptic Cairo remains its religious center. I do like cemeteries, and this one is a real trip. It's called City of the Dead, because that's what it is. It's a real city with real streets and houses. But the houses are for dead bodies. What is fascinating is the detail in which the houses resemble real houses. Many of the buildings are far better than what is lived in by Cairo's poorest people. Although this was the only cemetery we visited, the guidebooks say that in the larger northern cemetery, squatters have taken up residence in these structures. We didn't see any evidence here, however. Well, that's not 100% accurate. Actually, we did see pigeons. You know, no matter where we go in the world, there they are, pigeons. I hate pigeons.
From the river bus, the Cairo skyline is interesting, but not much different from the view of any city skyline from any river. To appreciate the true meaning and history of the Nile, you must leave Cairo and take a Nile cruise in Upper Egypt. By the way, Upper and Lower Egypt are the opposite of what you might think. Cairo is in Lower Egypt, which is in the north, while Upper Egypt is in the south. Upper and Lower are based on the flow of the Nile, which starts in Upper Egypt in the south and flows north to Lower Egypt in the Mediterranean.
From Cairo, we took a direct flight to Luxor in Upper Egypt, where we boarded our cruise boat, Ramses, King of the Nile. This was our home for the next week. The ruins in Egypt fall into 2 major categories, burial and ceremonial. The pyramids of Giza were burial tombs for the pharaohs of the Old Kingdom, but were targets of tomb robbers. The temples along the bank of the Nile are ceremonial and religious. They were built by the pharaohs to pay homage to the pantheon of Egyptian gods, and of course to honor themselves. These are religious sites and allowed the pharaohs to display their wealth and power while alive. Of course, the priests of the various cults encouraged this, and while the pharaohs may have ruled the kingdom, religion held enormous power over the government, much as it does today. The temples range in size, but even the smallest displays great artistry, while the largest, such as Karnak and Luxor, would dwarf the Vatican in size and splendor. During the Old Kingdom, the capital of Egypt was in Memphis in Lower Egypt, and the pyramids were built. Following the fall of the Old Kingdom, the Middle Kingdom rose, and Thebes became the center of government. Karnak's great temple of Amun was started in the 12th dynasty during the last days of the Middle Kingdom. The temples of Luxor and Karnak were built between 1000 and 2000 BC, and a sphinx-lined avenue joined the two. Later on, Christians converted portions of the temples for use by their cult. Between 1500 and 1000 BC, the pharaohs made Thebes their permanent residence, and the small town of Thebes became a bustling metropolis with a population of nearly 1 million. The country was wealthy, and the pharaohs built temples to the gods and to themselves on a scale that has never been equaled. A few things to note. The 134 columns of the hypostyle hall that dominated scenes from Agatha Christie's Death on the Nile. And no, they're actually closed buds of the lotus blossom. The rebuilt wall on the left, up close you can see at least one block was placed upside down, very Egyptian. These pillars depict the papyrus of Lower Egypt and the lotus blossom of Upper Egypt. Together these show the unification of the country under a single ruler. This motif is found repeatedly in temple carvings. The final journey of every pharaoh was by funeral barge across the Nile. The Valley of the Kings is a desolate, rocky, barren valley on the west bank of the Nile, which became the necropolis of Thebes and the burial site for countless pharaohs. After visiting the pyramids of Giza, one might expect something similar here, but pyramids were only built for a few centuries. Despite the efforts of archaeologists, only a fraction of the tombs have been discovered, and nearly all were looted thousands of years ago. But in 1922, Howard Carter broke through the seal of King Tutankhamun's tomb and found it as it was in 1322 BC. The tomb of this boy king, who ruled for only a short time, provided riches beyond belief. One can only imagine what the tombs of Ramses and other pharaohs must have been like. Conditions in the valley remain primitive, and the entrance to the tombs resembles abandoned mine shafts. Although the valuable tomb furnishings were removed long ago, the beautiful tomb paintings have been protected from the sun and still retained their vivid colors and detail. The best-known monument in the Valley of the Kings is the Temple of Queen Hatshepsut, the only woman to actually rule as pharaoh. This three-tiered temple was found beneath hundreds of tons of sand. The architect, Senmut, Hatshepsut's lover, designed the temple with rows of columns that reflect the vertical pattern of the cliffs in which it is carved, a wonderful example of architectural harmony between man and nature. Leaving the desolate yet fascinating necropolis of Thebes, we return to Luxor. A few liters of Coca-Cola quenches our thirst, and we're ready to reboard our cruise boat as it gets underway for our trip up the Nile.
As you journey along the Nile, you begin to comprehend what Herodotus meant when he said, "Egypt is a gift of the Nile." Without the Nile, Egypt would be a barren desert. The world's longest river, the Nile, springs from two sources. The White Nile, which begins in Uganda's Lake Victoria, is joined in the Sudan by Blue Nile from Ethiopia. The river then flows north through Egypt. There is no rain in the Nile Valley, only man-made canals to irrigate crops, and village life changes little from century to century. Since the beginning, Egypt has used the river for travel and subsistence. Traditional boats known as feluccas are still in use today by Egyptians and tourists. These graceful single-sailed boats can be seen everywhere. Through recorded history, the annual flooding in the valley left valuable new topsoil, but sometimes damaged villages along the banks. The annual inundation was part of the culture of ancient Egypt and the basis for taxes and economy. After the fall of the pharaohs, 2,000 years of silt and sand buried entire cities, which have only come to light in recent excavation. Dendera has existed since the Old Kingdom, nearly 4,000 years, but most structures there today are less than 2,000 years old. The Temple of Hathor is fascinating. It's dedicated to Hathor, one of the oldest Egyptian goddesses, but the walls include carvings depicting Roman emperors. Rome was shrewd in adopting the religious customs of the countries it conquered, but showing Negro in Caligula dressed as Pharaoh and making offerings to Hathor, the goddess of love and fertility, shows that spin doctors have been around a lot longer than we realized. Hathor is easy to recognize by her ears, which are always cow ears. You can see her head on each of the column capitals in the hypostyle hall of her temple. Esna is a small farming community on the West Bank and seems oblivious to the excavation pit in the middle of town. You visit the temple by taking stairs 30 feet down to where the temple has been freed from a millennia of silt. The current temple was built by Claudius, but with texts in praise of the Egyptian god Khnum. This structure rests on top of earlier temples from earlier eras. If you look, you can see that the capital of each column has a unique design and pattern. Kamombo is dedicated to Sobek, the crocodile god, hence the mummified crocodiles, and is the only temple that is dedicated to two gods, Sobek and Horus. The entire complex is built in duplicate down a central axis.
twin entrances, courts, halls, and sanctuaries, all exactly the same. Kamompo was built in the Greco-Roman times around 200 BC, but the relief carvings are excellent for that period. Today one travels the Nile on a modern cruise boat designed specifically for tourism. The top deck is geared for sunbathing, swimming, and celebration. Right now we're passing a boat headed the other way, and everybody came out to wave. The boats offer comfortable accommodations, but are almost too westernized. The food tends to be bland and almost guaranteed not to offend anyone with either taste or texture. On the final night of the cruise, there was a banquet that was definitely a step up from the usual fare. There was also a gala party, and everyone came dressed in costume. Needless to say, the local economy got a real boost as we all went shopping for jalabayas and other suitable Egyptian finery. While in Aswan, we stayed on the Elephantine Island in what the guidebooks accurately describe as the disfiguring blot that rises on Elephantine Island, the deluxe and famously ugly Aswan Oberoi Hotel. The good news is that since we were on an island, we got to take felucca several times a day to commute to town. A small boat will take you from Aswan to Philae, except that it isn't. It's the Temple of Isis, and it was on the island of Philae for 2,300 years. The high dam would have covered it, so in 1960 UNESCO rescued it. They moved the entire temple complex stone by stone to the nearby Agalika Island, where it was reassembled. Isis was the sister wife of Osiris, and when she was gathering his dismembered body after his murder, she found his heart on Philae. This island became sacred to her and her followers. Because Isis, Osiris, and Horus formed the framework of ancient Egyptian religion, the temple was a holy place visited by pharaohs to show their connection to Horus. The cult of Isis was so strong that she was still worshipped after Rome adopted Christianity and remained a powerful goddess as late as 600 AD, by which time most Egyptian gods had been replaced by Christianity. A 20-minute flight from Aswan brings you to Abu Simbel. These two temples represent an engineering feat spanning 3,000 years. Ramses the Great had them carved into a cliff wall overlooking the Nile. For 1,500 years, sand drifted down and buried them. In 1813, they were accidentally discovered. Excavation began, and drawings of David Roberts made them famous even before they were fully revealed. As water behind the new dam inched higher, UNESCO issued a worldwide appeal for funds and expertise to save Abu Simbel. Over a 4-year period, the temples were cut into 2,000 blocks, each weighing up to 40 tons, and moved to a new site where they were reassembled overlooking Lake Nasser. The new site is actually an artificial mountain constructed to replicate the cliff face of the original site. The 4 statues of Ramses are over 65 feet tall, and the figures of his mother, wife, and children look tiny but are larger than life-size. The ceiling of the hypostyle hall is held up by 8 40-foot statues of Ramses. Past the hall and through a vestibule is the sanctuary. There are figures of 4 gods, one of whom, of course, is Ramses. Twice a year on the equinox, the morning sun will enter the temple, pass through the hypostyle hall and vestibule, and enter the sanctuary, lighting 3 of the statues, but Ptah, the god of death, is left in darkness. Next to the Temple of Ramses is the Temple of Hathor. The entrance is decorated with 6 statues, 4 of Ramses and 2 of his beloved wife Nefertari, for whom, of course, this temple was built. The interior is filled with colorful murals of Ramses and Nefertari giving praise to Hathor. Although Abu Simbel can be reached by plane, there are no sidewalks, and wheelchair access is limited to the strength of your friends. Surviving the heat of Abu Simbel, the weary traveler gives thanks to the local gods for a successful journey. On the cliffs of the Nile opposite the town of Aswan are the tombs of the nobles dating from the Old and Middle Kingdom. The mausoleum of the Aga Khan at the top may not be open, but if it is, you can reach it by camel. You should be able to visit the nearby monastery of St. Simeon. Built in the 7th century, this was one of the early Christian strongholds until the 13th century when it was taken over by Muslims. You can still see graffiti left by the Muslims who stayed here on their pilgrimage to Mecca. In the 1970s, Egypt was assisted by Russia in the construction of the High Dam in Aswan.
The High Dam is seen as a great success, but only time will tell. The silt which brought nourishment to the soil is now trapped behind the dam, and one wonders how long it can continue to be contained by a mere man-made construction. Perhaps in another 1,000 years, tourists will come and see it as one more curiosity along the Nile.
Our vacation is nearly over, but we can't leave without a visit to the Citadel in Cairo. The Citadel was built by Saladin in the 12th century as a defense against European crusaders who were at the time rampaging through Palestine. It was an effective fortress built from stones taken from the smaller pyramids of Giza. Although no longer used as either a fortress or a seat of government, it's still a popular site visited mostly by school children and a few tourists. It sits on a plateau overlooking the city, and from the ramparts you can see all of Cairo, or, on a day like today, you can get a great view of the smog. Saladin's dynasty was overthrown after 80 years by the Mamluks, who built this mosque as well as beautiful palaces and harems. The Mamluks were driven out in the 16th century by the Ottomans, who added additional fortifications to the complex. When Napoleon's forces arrived in 1798, they considered the Mamluk structures to be some of the world's finest examples of Islamic architecture. When the French departed, however, Muhammad Ali destroyed all of the Mamluk buildings except for this mosque, which he used for a stable. He then built his own mosque, also known as the Alabaster Mosque. It was designed by a Turkish architect and is a popular tourist site, but has been referred to as looking like a large squatting toad. This started as just one more visit to one more historic site, until Alice followed the white rabbit down the rabbit hole. Well, I guess that's what happened, because suddenly we were no longer seeing the sights, we were the sight. The first time someone held out a camera, I thought they wanted me to take their photo for them, but no, they wanted to have their photo taken with me. After the first one, there was pushing and shoving, and each of them had to have their very own private photo op. My camcorder was on, but since I was surrounded by bodies, all I could get was lots and lots of pictures of lots and lots of Egyptian feet.
I thought you wanted us to take a picture of them.
So did I. Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Your nationality?
United States, America?
Yes.
American.
We enjoy with us. I am a teacher. Teacher in a commercial school. This is pupils. Please, we want to take a photo with you.
Certainly, of course, that would be very nice.
We thank you, or all the viewers thank you. Now, photo with you.
Here we are, thousands of miles from home, and all we want to do is photograph these people who are exotic foreigners. Instead, it turns out that natural blondes with bright lipstick and no headscarves are the real foreigners.
Thank you very much. Nice meeting you and your students all speak English very well. I've been very amazed all of your children
Now this is the mosque that looks like a toad. Oh, and there's the chintzy clock that never works.
Oh, okay. Is this one we have to pay to go in, or can we just go in here?
I would say from the throngs the answer is no, but I'm not sure I want to take off my shoes. They'll take them and cut them up as souvenirs. Don't you think?
I think so. Relics.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
Bonjour. Bonjour.
Hello.
Bonjour.
How are you?
Very good, thank you.
Hello. Can't understand some of it.
Follow your
English, you know?
Let me tell you, being a celebrity is exhausting. Even sitting on a curb taking a break was impossible. Fortunately, I had my camera turned on so that I could photograph my fans paying homage to Queen Gretchen I.
Good morning.
Morning.
Are they all with you? Bye. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
And the Dateless sisters arrived at the Citadel, and the throngs came out from the
to greet us.
streets and take our pictures.
I wish I could have gotten a picture of them taking pictures of us.
Welcome, Dateless sisters, to Cairo.
Fatigued from the effort of being gracious to disciples, Queens Gretchen and Craig, or to use their pharaonic titles, Princess Yala Yalabinya and Prince Stella, returned to their hotel. We must now prepare ourselves to return to a country where civilization has flourished for 500 years instead of 5,000, and where life moves to the beat of a very different drummer.